Phil Giordano.
I'm here. Hi.
Hi. Chris Paff.
Here.
Kate Nee.
Here.
Josh Ames.
Here.
I'm Ellen Rawlings, and I'm here. We are also joined by Elijah Romulus, who is our town planner, and Jessica Cole, who is our recording secretary. I see Nora Loughnane, who is our director of community and economic development, has just joined, and we also have Alex Portillo from Westwood Media Center. Thank you, everyone, for being here. This meeting is recorded by Westwood Media Center and broadcast live on local cable television Comcast Channel 6 and Verizon Channel 42. Meetings are also live on the Westwood Media Center's YouTube channel. If you're interested in joining the meeting via Zoom, you can find the login directions in the planning board meeting notice that is posted to the calendar section of the town's webpage at https://www.townhall.westwood.ma.us/. We will begin the meeting with only the board members and staff unmuted and on video. As the chair recognizes individuals to speak, we will unmute them. Board members may choose to mute themselves when they are not speaking in order to minimize background noise. For applications, the chair will first invite the applicant to address the board and give a presentation summarizing what is being requested. Board members received the application materials prior to the meeting and will have reviewed them. Board members may ask questions during and following the presentation. Staff and outside experts will provide comments to the board. If the issue includes a public hearing, the board will then proceed to the public comment portion of the public hearing and will restate the instructions. In this remote meeting format, residents and guests may participate in several ways. Attendees should raise their hand and wait to be unmuted and recognized to speak over the Zoom meeting application or from a telephone dial-up. We will be able to hear you, but not see you. Additionally, comments may be submitted via email or regular mail prior to the meeting. When we come to that part of the meeting, I will remind everyone of the process. Following the public comment portion, the board will deliberate and make a decision or continue the hearing to a specific future date. All remote meetings require votes be taken by roll call. When a motion and a second has been made, the chair will ask if there's any further discussion before proceeding to a roll call vote and will then restate the results of the vote. All right. Elijah, do we have any changes to our agenda this evening?
No.
All right. With that, our first agenda item is 394 Providence Highway, which is a minor modification request, if I am not mistaken.
Yes. So we have their attorney, Michael Brown, who is joining, and I believe is Daniel also part of the team?
Yes, he is, Elijah. How you doing? Thank you.
No problem. All right. He should be joining shortly.
Great. Excellent. All right. Well, welcome.
Thank you.
Welcome. And I'm happy to turn the floor over to you. And
Sure, I'd be happy to. Thank you. Good evening, everybody. We're here on a modification application to plans for a gas station that was built at 394 Providence Highway. We were back before this board last summer and received approval on the plans, I believe, in early September of 2023. I'm here on behalf of Colbia Enterprises, which owns the gas station, and Daniel Petrovic is with me as well. He is from Deprete Engineering. And I believe we have two items on this particular part of the agenda. One is our application for modification, and that concerns the accessible parking spaces in front of the gas station. There's also another issue, which I don't think is part of that application, but I think is confirmation for something that the building department had requested of us. And so that's the easier one, and I can address that first. We had requested during the construction of the new gas station for permission from the building department to surround the dumpster enclosure with chain link fence, which is not allowed by the zoning bylaws. The building department said no, and so we undertook to install fencing, the correct type of fencing around the dumpster enclosure. That work has been done. I have a photograph of it. If you'd like me to share my screen and show it to you, maybe Elijah can confirm that it's been done. but I just wanted to set the board's mind at ease about that particular issue. Secondly, and I can ask Daniel to say more about this, we had received approval on our parking layout, that is with regard to the number of spaces, the location, and particularly the number of accessible parking spaces. I believe one was required, one accessible space. Our original plans called for two. While we were building the project, our licensing partner, Shell, asked us to rearrange some of the parking and reclassify some of the parking. Specifically, they asked us to make one of our electric charging spots accessible, which caused us to move our accessible spot over to the charging area. This is a deviation from the original plans that this board approved back in September. It also, and Daniel can confirm this for me, but it also whittled the number of our accessible spots from 2 to 1, which I believe is still acceptable under the town's bylaws as well as the ADA guidelines. And so unless there are any questions before I turn it over to Daniel, I'll ask him to weigh in a little bit more.
Madam Chair,
Yes. Yes.
if I may. I just, Attorney Brown, I did see in the application that you submitted, the site plan that was submitted still called for 2 ADA spaces. So this is a deviation from what was applied for.
Okay, then if that's the case, Mr. Romulus, I may have it wrong, but I'll ask Daniel to step in and clarify.
Hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Daniel Petrovic from Dupree Engineering. Elijah, what's the date of the plan that you're looking at? Is that the final as-built that we sent over?
So I had taken a screenshot. It may take me a moment to get to the actual plan. Just give me a quick second. Yeah. All right, I'm pulling it up. Let's see. I have the O&M plan. I have the letter. The SWIP. And then I think this is the plan here. Yeah, of course, right now, Adobe does not want to respond.
Elijah, would that be what you're pulling up? Is that the same as what's in our packet?
That's correct.
Yeah, I'm looking at that now. It does say as-built survey. The date, sorry, I gotta zoom in a little bit. I have a tiny laptop screen.
No problem. It should be 11/15/23. Is that right?
That is the plan I have, and I do see 2 spots with the HC designation on it. So I
Right.
think that might be.
The confusion. Yeah, so I can help to clarify that. So the furthest 2 spots that you see that are in line with the building are the EV charging spaces, and you'll actually see that those spots have 2 bollards in front of them instead of just 1 bollard, which the rest of the parking spaces have. So one of those handicap spaces that is called out on this plan is for the EV charging station. Michael touched on this, but after we received approval from the town of Westwood, new direction from Shell led us to try to be eligible for the Massachusetts EVIP direct current fast charging program. So in order to be eligible for this program, one accessible EV space must be provided per 20 EV spaces. So it has to be 5% of your EV spaces must be accessible. So for just, even though we only have 2 spaces on this site that are for EV charging, to be eligible for this program, one of those spaces must be an accessible space. So alongside with those, with that program and the US Access Board design recommendations, you're allowed to share the striped area between these spaces. And because our total count for the site is 15 spaces, the US design recommendations are to have 1 fan accessible space. So although we are changing the shift from moving the old location to the new location to share that striped area is a reduction in the 1 accessible space, it's still above the, the requirement, which is only of the 1 fan accessible space, which if you go out to site, it has everything to be the, van accessible.
Thank you. That's helpful. Was there anything else that Daniel, you or the rest of the applicant team, was there anything else you wanted to share? I don't want to cut you off.
No, I think that pretty much sums it all up. The total requirement parking spaces for this site per, your zoning regulations are 15. We're still providing 16. We were providing 16 before, we're providing 16 now. We were just showing the 2 ADA spaces because that's typically what we'll do when we have a striped area like that before the requirement for EV. But after the EV requirement came up, knowing that we only needed the 1 van accessible spot, we thought the best thing to maximize spacing on this site would be to share that striped area. So that's why we went with that decision.
Thank you. Before I open it up to board questions, if possible, I would like to see the photo of the revised enclosure for the dumpster, if that's available. I would find that helpful.
Sure, if I could get permission to share my, oh, I can, okay. I hope you can see that. That's the dumpster closure as of this past Friday.
And that stockade, the wood fencing is on all 4 sides?
Yes, it is.
Okay, thank you. All right, then at this time, I'd like to open it up to board member questions or comments. I'm looking for raised hands. I'm not seeing any. Any additional staff comments? Elijah, Nora, anybody?
So, oh, go ahead.
Sorry, I'm still not clear on whether these 2 HC spaces shown on this plan will both be HC on the final plan, or if there's another plan you're asking to substitute for this.
So this is the final as-built. I understand the confusion. The HC is shown on both spaces because one is for just your typical accessible space, your van accessible space, which is the one on the bottom if you're looking at this screen, and the one above the striped area, which says HC. That actually, and it's not installed yet, but it will have the EV charging station in front of it where a vehicle can pull up and use that space to charge their car.
So that space that's further to the top, the second space in, would be a handicapped accessible charging space, not a handicapped accessible reserved parking space. So
correct. And the reason we can't call it a just say, hey, we still have 2 handicap spaces is because what is part of the program, we put a use last sign in front of that space. So accessible vehicles can still pull into that space and charge their vehicle at that charging station if the other one is already being used.
So I think the issue here is that the planning board has to grant approval for a modification of your plan set, and they don't have a plan set that shows the modification you're asking to have approved. So you have this as-built plan. You would need to have a copy of the plan that you previously had approved with the handicap space moved to the location it is now, and the other space would need to be marked accessible charging space as opposed to handicap reserve space. You'd have to note that on the plan in order for them to approve. So if the planning board is willing to approve that, that could become a condition of their approval, that you require a submission of a plan that shows exactly what it is they're proposing. So if the board members all understand what's being proposed and are willing to accept it, then we would still need a final record plan that shows what the board is approving.
Okay, and we can certainly provide that. So
Thank you. That clarifies things. So I appreciate that, Nora. So I see Kate and Chris have their hands up. I think that is spawning some board member discussion. So I saw Kate's hand up first.
Thank you. So just to be clear, and I really appreciate Nora, what you said, I want to make sure I understand it correctly. We will have one spot that would be available always for someone who needs a handicap spot. And then if it so happens that they also have an electric vehicle, they would kind of get first dibs on the accessible. The idea is that it would be very close to available, but not reserved for people who need the accessibility. I don't know who that question is to, but that's my, I just want to say it again.
I think
Hear it
that's
again.
accurate. Yeah, I think that's accurate.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kate. Chris.
When this was first approved, where were the handicap spots located?
the handicap spots were located a bit further down. I don't know.
Closer to the door?
Correct.
That's correct.
Okay. And were they ever in that location or just on plans?
It just on the plans, I believe. Can you clarify that question?
Were they ever painted, built, or whatever near the door, or were they always put to the far left?
No, so the change was made during construction. So at no point were they painted in the location that was shown on the plans that were originally approved by the planning board.
So what we approved was handicap spots near the door. Then construction moved them over to the left.
Further
Yes.
up sheet, correct.
Okay, I'm going from the view of being in the parking lot, looking at the door. All right, I don't have as much of a problem, assuming that the math is correct and what is needed for our parking lot standards. I assume Elijah and Nora can take care of that. I guess I'm more upset to move the handicaps farther away from the door than I am about making one of them EV charging or both of them EV charging. So that's just my comment. I remember talking about it. That's why my first question was, where were they originally? Because I thought they were near the door. So that's the lion's share of my concern is the move in themselves. I understand why it was done. I don't like that it was done, but I understand. I assume there's equal access. There's ramp at the end of the walkway, and there's access between the bollards and the building. There's enough for ADA compliance, given how much farther they have to travel on that in a possible wheelchair situation.
Yep, that's correct.
Yes.
Yeah. And I assume if we ever get snow again, it would be fully cleared so that doesn't become a problem with handicap accessible on the sidewalk. It's a pinch point with cars going up there. It's just, I could see a snow creating drifts or piles along there, making it hard for wheelchair. So I'm done. Those are my concerns, the move itself.
Thank you, Chris. Phil, I see your hand up.
Yeah, Chris addressed part of mine, which was the ramp and the access, but the other question I had was signage. Is there a differentiation on signage for the spots or no?
Correct. So in front of the van accessible parking space, it's the ADA required accessible space, and then van accessible below that, and that's a wall mounted sign.
A wall mounted sign, okay, so it's clearly, it's clear and clearly delineated.
Correct. And there's also striping that differentiates between the EV spaces and the handicap space. So you have signage and striping that'll help differentiate.
Okay, I echo Chris, because that was the other portion that I was going to say with the move of the spot, but same concern, but I understand now.
Thank you, Phil. Kate.
Yeah, thank you. I did want to echo, what Chris was saying. I want to remind myself there's no overhang here, right? Their whole way from their spaces to the door is they're under, they could be rained on or snowed on. Yeah, right. Okay, great. So that was one thing. But then I also wanted to understand, what we approved wasn't built. So before you moved forward, I just want to understand, were you talking with the town about the changes that you needed to make, or I want to understand the process maybe from the town's point of view. I haven't seen something like this before, where we approve something and then that isn't what happened. So I just want to understand how often this happens, and was it handled appropriately?
Oh, go ahead, Elijah. Sorry.
So, Madam Chair, so I just
Yes.
want to say that typically the applicant would reach out to us prior to making a change and not come after the fact. I guess things were altered based on the EV charging station addition. But yeah, it's usually the applicant would come, propose the change and then make it.
Thank you. I guess now I'm going to recognize Josh to speak, but I guess on the back of that, I would just like to editorially say, in general, I'm far more receptive to someone asking permission rather than asking forgiveness. So I would encourage the applicant in the future, because I know you've done other projects in Westwood, and I hope you continue to do projects in Westwood, that I think it would be beneficial when you encounter something where you need to make a change like that, please come to us before you make the change in the future moving forward.
All of your points are very well taken, and I'm not sure where in the building process this change happened. I gather that it happened near the end, when it was, the equipment was on site and they were forced to make a difficult choice. And given how the new location doesn't really violate any laws, ordinances, or guidelines, I can only surmise that that was their thinking. But I certainly understand your point, and we'll be sure to advise them that going forward, they get permission first.
Thank you. And now I see Josh has his hand up. So thank you.
Yeah, so I think it really not belabored the point, because it's very salient for me. I would approve this in a moment. I love it. It's not a big deal, but the process failure, I'd like to understand from the town's perspective. Is there any mechanism in place? Usually it would be you don't get C of A until the plans are built as shown, right? As approved. What process do we have in place to ensure that the planning board's decisions for these types of things do occur? I mean, because this also was caught for the fencing, but just not this, right? Or I guess sort of the chain link was already built.
So both of those things were brought up, and Josh, as you mentioned, it is something that myself on an inspection, and the building department as well, the building commissioner, both had seen the changes, issued a temporary occupancy permit as opposed to a full. occupancy permit in order for them to be able to make sure that they come before the planning board for the approval. So I guess
Okay.
that's the mechanism that the town had used to ensure that the plans were corrected.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Yeah, and
Did my,
I would just,
so-
forgive me, I'm sorry, I would just add one thing, which is that, you know, the construction was not completed until, you know, fairly recently, within the last couple of months, you know, during which time we had to get our application drafted and the as-builts submitted and all of that, and then get on the agenda. And so it's not like this happened months and months and months ago. It is fairly recently. So if that's any, if that explanation helps at all.
yes, thank you. That is helpful. Did and my colleagues have any other questions, comments, concerns? I guess my only question would be, to town staff, really, are there any concerns about the change, specifically about one of the ADA spaces becoming more of a shared use space, for lack of a better way to put it? Are there any issues from the town's perspective with that, or is that acceptable?
This was reviewed by Building Commissioner Mike Perkins, and he found it to be compliant with the regulations that apply by having one space. So it appears that there are two spaces that are available for handicapped individuals as long as no one is charging their car in one of them. One space is all that is mandated by the Architectural Access Board, so having one space is sufficient. The other's available if it's available. If there are two cars using chargers and neither of them are handicapped, vehicles owned by people who need handicapped accessible cars, there's nothing we can do about that. But there will always be the one space that's reserved for someone who needs a handicapped space, and that is sufficient to meet the requirements.
Perfect, thank you.
And also, I just want to point out that the new spaces are not significantly further from the door. So this illustration shows the image on the top is where the spaces were originally intended to be, to the right of the door, not immediately in front of it. The image on the bottom is where the space will now be. And it's, you know, maybe 20, 30 feet further away from the door, but it's not, it's not an onerous change. A handicapped individual can still enter. They're still at the front of the building and they're still fairly close to the front door.
Thank you. I appreciate that clarification. Wonderful. Any other comments from board members or staff?
Yeah, so I just wanted to also mention that this situation may present itself not with this applicant, but it may present itself in the future as the code has changed for handicap spaces in relation to EV charging. So this, you know, is something that we'll keep an eye out on our end. And then in general, I would like to say that it is nice to see more EV charging stations accessible to the public.
Agreed, and thank you. I think we understand things are changing, the code's changing, and I actually appreciate that this applicant wanted to, you know, be part of that initiative. So I'm happy to see the change with more EV charging stations, and I have no further concerns about this. So if neither my colleagues nor town staff had any further comments or questions, at this point, I would be happy to entertain a motion.
I move that the planning board determine the modification of the environmental impact and design review EIDR approval and earth material movement EMM for the Colby Shell Seasons Market at 394 and 396 Providence Highway, as described in the application, therefore submitted to the planning board and filed in the office of the town clerk on January 23rd, 2024, to be minor in nature.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll take a roll call vote. Kate?
Aye.
Josh,
Aye.
Chris,
Aye.
Phil?
Aye.
I vote aye as well. The motion carries. Now I would entertain a second motion.
I move that the planning board grant a minor modification of the environmental impact and design review EIDR approval and earth material movement EMM for the Colvia Shell Seasons Market at 394 and 396 Providence Highway, as described in the application therefore submitted to the planning board and filed in the office of the town clerk on January 23rd, 2024, subject to the following conditions. One, except as modified by the conditions and findings hereof, the project shall comply with the project plans in all respects, and the applicant shall pursue completion of the project with reasonable diligence and continuity. Two, if the project or any condition imposed in this decision requires any other permit, license, or other approval from any board or commission or any agency of the town of Westwood or other regulatory agency of the Commonwealth or the federal government, the applicant shall make an appropriate application for the same and shall obtain all required approvals prior to the start of any work. If any condition of such permit, license, or other approval from any other board, committee, or agency is inconsistent with this decision, the applicant shall make application to the planning board for an amendment of this decision, and the planning board shall consider such application in accordance with the requirements of MGL Chapter 40A, subsection 9, and all applicable planning board rules and regulations. 3. Any proposed alterations, modifications, deletions, or changes to the environmental impact and design review EIDR approval and consolidated earth material movement EMM shall be requested in writing to the town planner and building commissioner prior to implementation. Proposed alterations which are considered de minimis by the building commissioner may be accepted as a note to the file. Proposed alterations which are considered minor by the building commissioner shall require the filing of an application of modification of said approval for review by the planning board at a publicly posted planning board meeting. Proposed alterations which are determined to be major by the building commissioner or by the planning board shall be considered by the planning board as a formal amendment to the approval and will require a new public hearing for the planning board. Number 4, prior to the issuance of a permanent occupancy permit, the applicant shall submit an updated site plan to indicate a wooden stockade fence on all 4 sides of the dumpster enclosure and corrected ADA space marking for review and approval by the town planner.
Second.
Could
I have
I,
a motion. Sorry,
could I
yes?
just could I just ask you to add the requirement that prior to the issuance of a permanent occupancy permit, the applicant shall submit an updated site plan showing the conditions of the handicap parking space and accessible charging space as discussed this evening?
Can that be tacked on to condition 4, or should it be a separate condition?
Either way is fine. That looks
All
like looks like Elijah's putting it into
Yes.
condition 4.
Fabulous. All right, we'll give that a moment, and then would Josh just need to amend his motion and then it would need to be reseconded?
Yes, please.
All right,
Amend my motion to include number 4, prior to the issuance of a permanent occupancy permit, the applicant shall submit an updated site plan to indicate a wooden stockade fence on all 4 sides of the dumpster enclosure and corrected ADA space marking as discussed on March 12, 2024 for review and approval by the town planner.
Second.
I have an amended motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll take a roll call vote. Josh,
Aye.
Chris,
Aye.
Phil,
Aye.
Kate.
Aye.
I vote aye as well. The motion carries. All right, and this was not a public hearing, so there's nothing to close. Thank you very much.
Thank you all very much. Much appreciated.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, next on our agenda, what I have as item number 2 is review of street acceptance requests submitted for annual town meeting, Ellis Street, Porter Street, and Hedgerow Lane, continued from February 13th, 2024.
Yes. So there's still a review in process for both the portions of Ellis Street and Porter Street. So between our side of staff, we've been working with DPW and our consulting engineer to make sure that we find the correct plans. We've been kind of going through them. I've done a deep dive into the Registry of Deeds myself. These are older plans, so we just are making sure that there is an actual subdivision that's tied to these plans. We were able to find a few, and now it's up to the survey team from the consulting engineer to actually go out and adjust the plans, to the subdivision sets that they were able to find. So Porter Street has been accounted for. Ellis Street is still in question because the subdivision that was found for Ellis Street was dated 1926, and that was years prior to the subdivision control law giving planning boards the power to regulate subdivisions. So at this moment, we're still waiting for the beta group to be able to get back to us. I believe they will be able to do so within the 2 weeks' time, and I would suggest that the board, continue this to March 26th in order to give them time to account for the streets. And then in regards to Hedgerow Lane, there was still some inspections that I would need to make as it relates to the grass in that area, and making sure that they have actually taken over the winter. My plan is to go Monday the 25th to give enough time, with the spring weather, to make a determination. And my suggestion will be at the March 26th meeting, we're able to make a decision on those streets.
Thank you. 2 quick questions for you. Refresh my memory. Is this discussion a public hearing or no? It's not, right?
It is a public hearing.
It
Oh,
is.
no,
Okay,
wait.
so
Let me see. I'm sorry. let me
The street articles are
check.
not a public hearing.
are not.
Just-
Okay, I just,
no,
I
just
was
a,
thinking in terms of public comment before we make any kind of motions, but all right. And my other question is, again, please refresh my memory. That is the night of the FinCom hearing. So would our meeting be at the FinCom hearing? We're attending that meeting in theory, right?
Yes, I'd recommend that you actually meet in advance of that hearing at the same location. So
That's
that
where I
means
was going with that. All right, so we would, when we continue it to the specific date and time, it would be ahead of the FinCom, maybe 6:30 if the public hearing for FinCom is 7. Does that sound acceptable? Okay. Just want to make sure we move this correctly. Okay, if there's no objections from my colleagues, I agree. I think it makes sense to continue this discussion to, it would be March 26th, let's say, 2024, let's say 6:30 PM at a meeting room to be determined, but at the Westwood Public Library.
yes.
That's right. Let me see. I can share my screen.
I move that the planning board continue the following roadways for street acceptance at the May 2024 annual town meeting. Hedgerow Lane, Ellis Street, a portion of, and Porter Street, a portion of, to an in-person meeting of the planning board and finance and warrant commission final public hearing on Tuesday, March 26th, 2024, beginning at 6:30 PM at the public library, 660 High Street, Westwood, Mass. 02090.
Oh, sorry, second.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll take a roll call vote. Chris?
Aye.
Phil?
Aye.
Kate?
Aye.
Josh?
Aye.
I vote aye as well. Motion carries. That discussion is continued to our next meeting. All right. Sorry, I need to go back to my agenda. Okay, our next agenda item is 1054 High Street, continuation of the public hearing of limited environmental impact and design review, EIDR, to construct an addition to a private school building with parking alterations at 1054 High Street, continued from January 30th. It says 2023, I believe that's 2024.
That's right, 2024.
Okay, sorry, just making sure I wasn't misremembering. All right, Elijah, are we taking this up this evening? Is the applicant here?
So the applicant has requested a continuance. They have, there are still several items they need to address, including the screening, the landscaping, as well as the parking orientation. We have met with the applicant for a long, and long period of time. We elaborated on what we needed in the beginning of February. The applicant did make some changes based on that meeting, but it still did not, meet all of the needs that were discussed. So the applicant had requested a continuance. My suggestion would be to continue it to the Wednesday, April 24th, 2024 meeting, to give them enough time to make sure that they have submitted some plans so that we can review it ourselves and provide feedback prior to the meeting.
Thank you. That makes good sense to me. Unless anyone objects, I would entertain a motion.
I move that the
Oh, go ahead.
I move that the planning board continue the public hearing for the limited environmental impact design review, EIDR, for 1054 High Street as described in the application, therefore submitted to the planning board and filed in the office of the town clerk on September 13th, 2024 to Wednesday, April 24th, 2024 at 7 p.m. via Zoom, where a Zoom link and associated call-in numbers will be provided on the town's calendar on the homepage at https://www.townhall.westwood.ma.us/.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I will take a roll call vote. Phil?
Aye.
Kate?
Aye.
Josh?
Aye.
Chris?
Aye.
I vote aye as well. The motion carries and the public hearing is continued. All right.
I'm sorry, I gotta say something,
Yes.
Ms. Chair. I do believe that Josh said September 13th, 2024, not 2023.
I thought he did actually also.
I did.
So friendly amendment to correct it to, because that's a submission date, which was in 2023.
Correct. Just for the record, I'd like to get it straight.
Yeah, no, thank you. Procedurally, do we just need to amend the motion just with that date correction and then take another second and revote?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, so the friendly amendment was made, yeah? By me?
Yes, I think you were specific to change that to the submission date of September 13th, 2024.
Yes.
September 13th, 2023.
2023.
Sorry.
Oh, sorry, 2023. Sorry, as it is
Yes.
written. Excuse me, yes.
Yes, as it is written.
These
Yes.
minutes are going to be a mess.
Yeah. Apologies, Jessica. All right, so I have a friendly amendment. Do I have a second for the friendly amendment?
Second.
All right, I have an amendment and a second for the motion. Now I'll take a roll call vote on that. Josh?
Aye.
Kate?
Aye.
Chris?
Aye.
Phil?
Aye.
I vote aye as well. Motion carries. Procedurally, we good? Is that all sorted?
Yes.
Josh, I'm still
Okay.
glad you read it. Thank you.
All right. Thank you to everyone. Thanks, Jess, for calling that out. That was a good catch. All right, now sorry, that was 1054 High Street. The next agenda item would be the public hearing, the continuation of the public hearing for zoning bylaw and general bylaw amendment articles for May 2024 annual town meeting, continued from February 27th, 2024.
Yes. So the planning board has 6 articles that they discussed with the Finance and Warrant Commission on February 27th. There was one error that was in the definition article that was pointed out or that was discovered while we were at the FinCom meeting. So I'd like to show you the proposed correction to that article. Share my screen. So this is Planning Board Article 3, which is the zoning bylaw amendments relative to definitions. And I believe it's part 5 of that article. Oops, excuse me, jumping ahead too much. The illustrations were reversed in the last draft and the draft that was presented to the Finance and Warrant Commission. So this is just a change to correct the illustrations attached to the individual definitions. So the illustration for retaining wall height is this one here that shows 2 different retaining walls. So that's a change to part 5 of that proposed article. And for part 6, the change is right here to combined wall and fence height. And the illustration is the one that shows the wall and the fence. These illustrations were reversed in the version that we presented to the Finance and Warrant Commission. So I would ask if the planning board is willing to do so, if they would re-adopt Planning Board Article 3 with this amendment, and we will present the correct version of that to the Finance and Warrant Commission at their next hearing on March 26th. So I did point out this error at that meeting, but I want to send it again, send them a written copy of it with the illustrations in the proper order.
Thank you. I'm amenable to that. I think it makes sense. We want them to be correct. So I don't have a problem with that at all. Nora, were there other article points that you wanted to discuss? Like, do you want to go through them one article at a time, or was that really the only thing to address?
So there were very few comments on articles at that meeting. The vast majority of comments were on Article 1. So you may want to discuss Article 1 and see if there's any need to address any of the comments that were made at the meeting on that. I can just briefly, very quickly review the other articles with you. Article 2 involved the wireless communication districts that proposed changes to allow wireless communication districts at University Station, and it also proposed 2 parcels to be added to the map as allowable parcels for wireless communication facilities outside of University Avenue. And those 2 parcels were the map 27 lot 22, which is the Pheasant Hill Conservation Area, and map 27 lot 221, which is the June Street Playground. So the proposed article would add those to the map as properties eligible for the planning board to consider wireless communication in the future if there's an application that comes through. Planning board, and there were no recommended changes to that at the Finance and Warrant Commission hearing. Planning Board Article 3 was the one we just went through that needs revision. That is a zoning bylaw article with amendments to definitions. The definitions that are amended are building height, lot width, rear yard, detached accessory structure, retaining wall height, combined wall and fence height, and affordable housing. Again, there were no substantive comments that were made at the Finance and Warrant Commission hearing on that article. Then there's Planning Board Article 4, that's zoning bylaw amendment relative to zoning map references for overlay districts that changed the adult uses overlay district, the wireless communications overlay district, and the substance rehabilitation and the substance rehabilitation facility overlay district. In all of those cases, it removes specific parcel and address and property name references in the bylaw and replace them with references to the zoning map. Then Planning Board Article 5 was a zoning bylaw amendment relative to accessory apartments. That makes one minor change that adds the word gross wherever floor area appears in that bylaw. That has to do with just accessory apartments. No comments to that. And then Article 6 was a general bylaw amendment relative to solid waste. And again, what this does is it adds, it takes the Chapter 342 solid waste requirements in the current general bylaw that have requirements for dumpster enclosures and containment, and it adds temporary construction dumpsters at non-residential and multifamily residential properties. It requires them to be properly maintained and covered under the same section, Chapter 342, but it makes it clarifies that in the case of a temporary dumpster associated with a non-residential or multifamily residential property, the cover does not have to be integral to the dumpster, and there is no enclosure or screening requirement. Rather, the dumpster shall be covered by a securely fastened impermeable tarp or by other means sufficient to prevent the discharge of contaminated runoff or leachate into the soil, groundwater, or surface water. So that's a pretty limited article, and there were no concerns expressed at the Finance and Warrant Commission meeting. So unless board members feel that any of those articles require further amendments, I would recommend against it. The Finance and Warrant Commission accepted them as they were proposed, and it's a little late to be making changes unless they're absolutely necessary.
Do we need to vote on the change of the illustrations that you talked about?
Yes, please. So revote to accept Article 3. You can do that after you might want to discuss Article 1 to make sure that you don't recommend any changes there, because that did have substantive discussion at the hearing.
Okay.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I definitely heard the feedback at the meeting, and actually a couple of FinCom members had caught up with me after the meeting and shared some thoughts. So I think it's worthwhile giving Article 1 a bit more conversation tonight. I know we've had extensive conversations about it, but I feel like we would be remiss to not at least address some of the feedback that we got. So I would happily open up the floor to my colleagues if anyone has anything they'd like to share on Article 1 before I do. I'm not seeing any hands or any, everyone's shaking their heads. The one thing that I'd like to share is that, we did hear in the meeting, and what was kind of reiterated to me a bit more directly by a couple of FinCom members after the meeting was, it still feels like the bulk of the parcels we've selected are all in the Islington side of town, which is true. And there was some appetite and desire, if there was a way for us to do something on the 109 side, maybe swap a parcel or two. And, I just keep coming back to Westwood Glen. And I know we discussed that at length, but I am hearing from some FinCom members that there's a feeling of inequity. And I've heard it from some residents too, that given that we don't have to have all 25 acres within the half mile of the train station, it would be nice if we didn't have 80 to 85% of or 90% of those 50 acres with, all kind of concentrated in one side of town. So I just kind of wanted to, I thought it was important that we at least revisit that topic before we finalize the article. Josh.
Any chance that we could bring up the map again? Maybe a little further out. I know we're all interested in the Glen, but
No problem. All right, so this, let's see if I can put this a little farther back.
I would also, I'll say, I'm I'm prepared to take what we've drafted to town meeting, and I will stand with the consensus if that is what we decide. But again, given the feedback that we heard, I felt it was important that we at least discuss this one more time before making our final recommendation.
Elijah, I don't think that's the final version. It shows the 700 Canton Street parcel in the
The bottom right
FMUOD
corner, yeah.
district.
Okay.
And it doesn't show the Allied Drive parcels.
Yeah, so I guess, Ellen, what exactly have you been hearing or FinCom sort of said directly in terms of like the Islington side of town? Because in my experience, like when people have expressed concern around Islington, it's been very specific to like that Islington corridor, right?
Right. Right.
Which I neither agreed, disagree, but like I was actually very sensitive to the overloading over by University as well. But I think if you look at it as discrete sections of town, although like I think the Allied Drive like is arguably still on that side of town, it feels very far away. But I just like to understand more like what you've heard from FinCom or the residents in terms of like what constitutes the Islington side of town.
That's a good question. I mean, I think anything that's not, the impression I get is anything, because I'm hearing like, we just wish it wasn't really all in Islington, because from the perspective of a lot of people I've spoken to, the only two parcels that aren't Islington are the two areas we chose along 109. So the Good Plaza and I can never remember how you say it, the plaza with Dunkin' Donuts and Westwood Pizza, a
Mackenzie.
little. Thank you, Mackenzie. It's spelled differently, so I'm always wary of mispronouncing it. And this may just be a perception, but I think given that at FinCom, there was some conversation around, there was a 13-acre parcel kind of on, on the 109 side that we looked at and that we opted not to do, that generated some interest. I think that's why I've been hearing some of these conversations, that it's like, well, why didn't you choose that? Because why is everything over here? And again, I'm sharing what I've been told.
Yeah.
And I understand that perception. I do. I'm sensitive to that. But I agree with you. I think when I think of Islington, I was really trying to be sensitive to the Washington Street corridor and that whole area. And I think we achieved that, but I'm still hearing some concern. I don't know if that answered your question, but it was kind of a generic, or not generic. I don't want to make it sound like I'm minimizing it. A general, it would be nice if it wasn't the bulk of it in Islington. So I think the sense is anything that's not truly obviously on the 109 area feels like it's in Islington, Allied Drive, University, all of that still feels like it's all on the east side of town. I see other hands. Did that help, Josh, or sort of? Yeah.
Yeah, just a matter of starting the conversation. Like, what is the target here, right? Like for me, when we were first discussing it, I was very concerned about the Islington corridor, not like the east side versus the west side of town, right?
Right.
I was actually more concerned about like the specific densities within University, because I also don't want to see that overblown, right? But like the town is multifaceted. I mean, it's a bit of a chevron, but like each part of town sort of does really need to experience growth in some sort of way. And I'm totally in agreement of that. I think it's a bit of a misnomer to say anything that's not on 109 is on the Islington side of town. But like, I think it's good to have the conversation. I totally agree.
I agree. I think it's worth at least talking about this one more time. So thank you. I'm glad you asked the question. I do see other hands. I think Kate's hand came up next. Forgive me if I'm not right.
Yeah, thank you. I have a strong objection to categorizing Allied Drive as Islington and University Station. I mean, that's just inaccurate. And to my mind, we actually have 3 town centers, right? University Station being our newest one, the High Street being, having another one, and then Islington. And we put zoning in each of our 3 town centers. And I think there's going to be a lot of us who hear a lot of things. I'm unlikely to be swayed because we've put a lot of thought into this, and we've been very specific. So general comments like, it feels like a lot of it is Islington is not okay with me. I am curious, Nora, if we can get some sort of a percentage of actual full zoning, not just new parcels that haven't already been built, but all of the, what percentage do we consider to be in each of our 3 town centers that I've just kind of described? The percentage of units that would be, closest to each town center, and just put this thing to rest, because it is inaccurate to say that there's only 2 parcels not in Islington. So sorry, I'm a little, that makes me sound lazy that we put 2 on one on, you know what I mean? Like,
No,
versus
not
very
at all.
thoughtful.
No, I agree. I think I'm bringing up what I've been told is like a perception, and I appreciate your comments too. And I don't want to say I agree or disagree with any of what's being, I think there's validity, and I understand exactly what you're saying. And I understand your perspective on that too. I guess I felt it was important to have this conversation one more time, particularly since it felt like the Finance Commission had some concerns. So I just at least wanted us to have the conversation.
I
before we
appreciate
go
that.
to that last hearing.
And I think the question was actually about what percentage of it is in Islington, and the answer was a very large number. But I don't think, I mean, maybe it is, but let's just have a real answer instead of a guess.
Yeah, I agree. I think that is, and I agree with everything you've just shared, and I appreciate your comments. Thank you. I don't want to cut you off. Did you have more to add before okay, thank you. I'm not sure whether Chris or Phil's hand had gone up next.
Phil.
So, Phil, thank you.
Okay,
Phil.
that's fine. I'm gonna strongly echo Kate. It's periodic anecdotal evidence is to be taken, I think, as anecdotal and very little bit more. Occasionally I hear comments and whatnot, but I think we deserve a collective pat on the back as compared to questioning what the work that has been done over many, many hours that we've all put into this at this point, to question what has been, I think, a substantial effort. I was actually surprised FinCom had as few comments as they did. I was anticipating, especially in light of the recent Milton filing that the Attorney General had and some of the things that have really come to the forefront, that there was going to be a lot more discussion, that there was going to be, a lot more questions. And I strongly got the sense that FinCom was in general very supportive of the planning board's efforts. And I would be adamantly opposed to, at this 11th hour, making further revisions. I think we've done a great job, our best job, and I think we need to try to push it over the line, is my view.
Thank you. Chris, you took your hand down, but I know you have something you wanted to say.
Sorry. I didn't. Someone pushed it down for me, I guess. To kind of dovetail with what Phil was saying, not including the Glen was almost a strategic move. I think I said it's a great place to consider if it weren't this year, when we have to get this through town meeting. And as of right now, we don't have a fall town meeting, and I'm pretty certain they're not going to go to the expense of a fall town meeting just for us if the select board doesn't have any articles. So this is our one and done this spring. That's how we have to look at it. And we all said, and we all agreed that we would do best to present to FinCom and the town as a unanimous board. And I think we all, when we last spoke of this, we all agreed this particular lot would be a great candidate for 2025 Springtown meeting, and I think it would be. Nothing changes. You only need 50% plus one person. It's not like we have to go to 2/3 in a year. All the same rules still apply. I've said many times, I believe it's the role of this board to comply with the state law, fight off as much as we can chew, that we can get past town meeting this year. And I believe what we've presented to FinCom represents that. And more to the point, I think changing it at this, as Phil called it, the 11th hour, and I agree with that assessment, really doesn't put us in the strongest light. We've already presented to FinCom. We presented what we said was the best opportunity for us to pass this article at town meeting. So I think backing down from that or making alterations because a relative few people have expressed concerns over Islington and not Islington. And as I look at these, I guess my house would be considered Islington. I don't consider myself living in Islington, but I live on Everett Street and my kids went to Downey School. So I guess they would collectively call that Islington, but I don't consider myself an Islington resident. And I don't mean that good or bad. It happens not to be where I live. So I really don't, it's been happening. I've lived here since 1996 and the 109 versus the other side, it's been going on forever. And I'm frankly a little tired of it. Every section of town offers a different resource and it's up to us to best utilize the resources that we have available to us. And I think that's what we've done here with this parcel selection. And just a reminder, this is the MBTA law. It's rooted in public transportation. That happens to be at University Ave and Islington. So that's where this all started. That doesn't mean we couldn't have changed it. And we did talk about 109 side parcels, including Westwood Glen, but I think it was a good strategic choice not to include it this time. I think it would just, and I'm not in favor of swapping out right now at this late hour, just for appearance sake. There's no reason we can't do this again in a year. And if there's an appetite for more, and we can assess then. But right now we're at 65 acres. We needed 50, knowing we have a little bit of a buffer for the state to push back and maybe take some away. I'm sorry to kind of monopolize this here, but these are my thoughts as I'm thinking. We're not talking about Westwood Glen again. I would be against including it in this go around.
No, and that is all 100% valid, Chris. And you're not monopolizing. I think we all want to hear each other's thoughts on this. And I agree. I know we put a lot of time into this and we spend a lot of time looking at parcels. So like what I said, I'm ready to go to town meeting with this. I felt, given that we did get some feedback, it was worthwhile having the conversation. And if the outcome of the conversation is we're not going to make any changes, I'm okay with that. I think that's a valid outcome. I felt we would be remiss, given that we had gotten some feedback from the Finance Commission, who hopefully the majority will endorse this article for town meeting. I just felt it was important and respectful to at least have this conversation before we finalized our articles. But thank you. I appreciate all of your comments and your feedback. It's all super helpful. And it looks like
I think Josh has his hand up.
Yes, Josh has his hand up.
Yeah, I'm like very sort of evidence-based and very much to Kate's point, like I hear the concern. I don't think it's well formed, but I think to put it in a better context, if we very quickly look at some of these and say, this is what we see as our city centers, this is what we see as Islington, I think that puts some confines on the discussion and takes the, oh, well, I feel into, well, this is what actually is. I think there will always be the argument of, well, Tumblebus is going to have so many units and this and that and the acreage there. But the reality is, like, we're spreading this out across town, likely in the future I think there's a big appetite for 109 corridor, actually. Like, I think the residents of 109 want to see redevelopment. It's just a matter of when, how, and what makes the most sense right now. So I think if we just do a quick exercise of like identifying like what percentage wise has it been sort of distributed across the town, I think it would go a long way in terms of addressing any concerns that FinCom might have, or residents in general.
So if I
Yeah,
can take a stab at that. So this is the graphic from the last time you met on February 13th, where you established the consensus parcels. And if we look at these and determine what is considered University Station, what's considered Islington, what's considered the Rotary area, and what's considered the 109 side, I can give you percentages. So if we first look at the Rotary, would be just these two parcels here. Those would get to a capacity of 76 out of the 946 total unit capacity, which would be 8%. Then if we look at the parcels along Providence Highway, all of these, as well as the Foster block parcels as being in Islington. So if we consider Route 1, Washington Street, and Everett Street, all Islington, that would have a capacity for 231 of the 946 units, so 24.4%. University Station or University Avenue area would take in the Cornerstone property, all these properties in University Station, as well as Gables and Pulte. Together, the University Avenue part of the town would have a capacity for 599 of the 946 units, or 63.3%. And then lastly, Route 109 area, with just these three parcels here, those would have a capacity of 40 units, or just 4.2%. So just to recap, University Avenue would be 63.3%, Islington 24.4%, the Rotary area 8%, and 109 4.2%.
And I think to Chris's point, like calling Providence Highway,
That's what I was just gonna say.
part of Islington, I think is a stretch.
Yeah, I was going to do the same thing.
But,
I agree.
I don't see how Providence Highway is realistically Islington.
Well,
But-
it backs into those Islington neighborhoods. I mean, it abuts. So I consider that Islington.
yeah,
Yeah.
there's still a handful of homes on Providence Highway too, that I believe they probably consider themselves Islington too.
Yeah, but these are all on Providence Highway.
Right.
Like the entrance to these is Providence High. Like you wouldn't even see additional traffic except for maybe one parcel if we got the easement through, I forget which one it is.
I think it was
The
Salvatore. It was
the
either
map-
Dunkin' Donuts or Salvatore.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're still going to see foot traffic from this development through their property. Like
Okay.
it's, I think I count it as Islington. So I see where Nora did that.
Yeah.
But Madam Chair, if I may, I think that
Yes.
really helps us respond very well to the concerns of, to the concerns of residents. We have been very thoughtful, and this is dispersed as much as possible throughout the town.
Yeah, those numbers are very helpful. I appreciate that we took the time to do that because it's data. It's not amorphous. It's actually tangible, quantifiable data, and that is helpful in having these conversations. So I appreciate the board taking the time to have the conversation. I appreciate Nora and town staff taking the time to actually quantify that for us as well. Did any other board members or staff have any input? I'll ask Elijah, Nora, have you received any other feedback from, FinCom, anybody else that we should incorporate into this conversation, or?
So Elijah and I did meet with a couple of FinCom members this morning who had additional questions, and one of those members did specifically ask about actually about both Westwood Station and, oh, not Westwood Station, I'm sorry, Westwood Glen and Highland Glen, and whether the board had considered those properties. I explained that we had not, we'd considered all properties in town, but had not specifically focused in on Highland Glen, and that I did not see any benefit of including Highland Glen because it's a very large property, but because it's so far from a train station, we wouldn't be able to include that as a balance to get rid of some properties that are close to train station. So it would simply be increasing the number of acres and increasing the overall capacity to no real effect because that property is fully developed. It's very well developed from an affordable housing point of view, and I don't think we'd be looking at changes. So I explained that I didn't see that property was something that the board had any reason that they would want to see put into the zone. And I did explain that Westwood Glen had been discussed previously by the board, and some members seemed to be interested in it, but others did not want to for various reasons, but primarily because there was a concern that the parcels that were selected in what we were calling then the consensus listing had the best chance of success at town meeting. And those are the only conversations that I've had. I have not heard from anyone else with any questions or comments.
Thank you. Okay, then I have nothing further on this subject. I think this was a good conversation. And again, I'm grateful that we had it. I find it very helpful, and I think hopefully it will be helpful for all of us moving forward, having these discussions as we work our way up to town meeting. So what do we need to do next? We need to amend the language or accept the amend. Oh,
On the
sorry, yes.
illustration, just on the illustration.
Right.
Right. This is a public hearing, so I do see we have one question in the Q&A, and I will also invite members of the public who would like to ask questions or share comments. Please feel free to either raise your hand and we will allow you to speak, or enter it into Q&A. Please make sure you include your full name and address.
So the public comment that we have is from Fran Fusco at 20 Pine Lane. Hypothetically, how many units can we expect on each parcel on 109? I thought I heard 40.
So 40 is that's the calculation. So if you look at the bottom of the chart that's on the screen here, these are the 3 parcels that are included in the Mumford 4 district, for which would have ground floor residential and 15 units per acre. 15 units per acre comes out to a capacity of 40 units for all 3 parcels together. So if
you meant
all
ground
3
floor commercial, right?
With ground floor commercial plus
Yeah.
40 units of residential above the ground floor commercial. That's what could be developed if all 3 of those parcels were developed.
So
If
it's
it was
40
just one
total,
parcel,
not
so
40 per parcel.
Not each, right. So if we look at the Good Plaza there, so that has an acreage of 1.37. So that would be, just let me get my thing open. At 15 units per acre. Yeah. That would have a capacity for 20.55 acres above ground floor commercial. If you looked at the Mackenzie Plaza and Dunkin' Donuts together, since they're separate parcels, but they're under the same ownership, they would total 1.27 acres at 15 units per acre. That could have the other 19 units. So approximately 21 units of housing could be constructed over the Good Plaza, and approximately 19 units could be constructed at the Mackenzie Plaza, totaling 40 units overall. Now that's what could be constructed by right. The Mumford district allows any applicant who applies within the Mumford zone to request a special permit for an alternative configuration. That's what happened at the Everett Street, the former Foster Block or Tumble Bus site. They were entitled under Mumford to up to 102 units, but they produced a project that the board found worthwhile in pursuing, that in that case was a mixed use parcel where mixed use was not required, and the board allowed them to go up to 160 units in exchange for mixed use development.
you.
It looks like there is a follow-up. Is that a minimum? And the 15 units per acre is a maximum that they can build by right?
That's right. There is no minimum. So a developer can build up to the allowable
One.
density.
One
Yeah.
is the minimum.
Or none.
Right.
Nobody has
zero.
to take advantage of this.
They don't have to
bylaw.
do
Well, they
any.
don't have mixed use.
And this is only zoning. It's not actual building.
Right.
Correct.
But there's, if someone, as Petrucciello did with the current zoning at 22 Everett, if they have an interest in proposing something that would be a higher density, that would then what's by right in a particular Mumford zone, they'd have to do it via special permit.
That's right.
Right.
And then the planning board would have discretion whether or not to approve it. And if they were interested in approving it, what additional amenities they would want to see.
Thank you. Okay, I'll leave it open for another second or two for public comment. I'm not seeing any hands raised, nor am I seeing anything else in the Q&A. So,
Let me just get back to this. So I have a slightly amended motion I'd like you to consider.
This is on the exchange of the reversed illustrations, Nora.
It is. So what I'm going to ask you to do is simply the last time you approved all the articles together. So I'm asking you to do that the same way again tonight, but say as amended on March 12th. And the only amendment that you made was to Planning Board Article 3 to swap out the illustrations. There are no further amendments. So I'd ask you to make a motion to recommend favorable consideration of the proposed zoning bylaw and general bylaw amendment articles as amended on March 12th, 2024 tonight. And the favorable consideration would be both by the Finance and Warrant Commission and by voters at the May 24 annual town meeting. And then we specifically list all of the articles. So if the board is willing to make that motion, then what we will do is we will send the revised version of the full set of articles to the Finance and Warrant Commission tomorrow. So they'll have plenty of time to review it in advance of the next hearing.
quick question before someone starts reading this motion. As far as that one amended article with the drawings, do we as a board have to vote on that before we do this?
You don't. By voting this, that would be one of the amendments. So you can do
I
it either
see.
way. If you want to have a specific change, you can vote that separately, but it's fine. One motion to approve
Okay.
all the articles together with the amendments discussed tonight. That is sufficient.
Okay,
In one
that's
fell
fine
swoop.
by me.
Yeah.
I just wanted to make sure that covered us in case of future questions. So thank you. All right, given all of that context,
Kate, you're
at
up.
this time, I
Yeah,
would
this
entertain a
one's for all the
motion.
marbles. Here we go.
Mhm.
I move that the planning board recommend favorable consideration of the proposed zoning bylaw and general bylaw amendment articles as amended on March 12th, 2024 by the Finance and Warrant Commission and by voters at the May 2024 annual town meeting. Should I number them? Or just,
Sure, if you want to. So
I feel like I should.
just give me a second. Maybe one.
All right, I can read while you do that. Planning Board 1, potential amendments to zoning bylaw and zoning map amendments relative to mixed use and multifamily residential overlay district. Planning Board 2, potential amendments to zoning bylaw and zoning map amendments relative to wireless communications facilities. Planning Board 3, potential amendments to zoning bylaw amendments relative to definitions. Planning Board 4, potential amendments to zoning bylaw amendment relative to zoning map references for overlay districts. Planning Board 5, potential amendments relative to accessory apartments. Planning Board 6, potential amendments to general bylaws relative to solid waste.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I will take a roll call vote. Chris,
Aye.
Kate,
You're muted, Kate.
Aye.
nice. Phil,
Aye.
Josh,
Aye.
I vote aye as well. The motion carries. All right. Well, thanks, everyone. That was a very long season of zoning amendments this year, particularly Article 1. And again, I appreciate everybody's time and consideration, including town staff, everybody's effort on working on this. It has not been an easy task, but I'm grateful for everyone's time and attention on that. All right. So the next agenda item would be review of draft meeting minutes from February 13th and February 27th, 2024. And I would suggest that we take them individually, given that I think, Josh, you were not able to attend the 27th of FinCom here. So did anyone have any additions or edits to the minutes from February 13th? If there are no comments or changes suggested, I would entertain a motion to accept the minutes from February 13th, 2024 as written.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, take a roll call. Kate?
Aye.
Josh?
Aye.
Chris?
Aye.
Phil?
Aye.
I vote aye as well. That motion carries. Next, let's discuss the minutes from February 27th, 2024. That was our continuation of our public hearing and our attendance at the FinCom meeting. Did anyone have any edits or suggestions for those minutes? Okay, seeing none, then I would entertain a motion at this time that we accept the minutes for the February 27th, 2024 meeting as written.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll take a roll call vote. Kate?
Aye.
Josh?
Abstain.
Chris?
Aye.
Phil?
Aye.
And I vote aye as well. That motion also carries. All right, the next agenda item for us tonight is updates from agency and committee representatives. Has anyone been to any meetings that they would like to share updates on? Been very quiet. We've all been very absorbed with zoning. Okay, nothing for board members. Elijah, would you like to give us an update on the climate action resiliency plan?
Yes, for sure. So let me share my screen. So on April 11th, 2024, that's a Thursday, the Climate Action Task Force will be hosting a public meeting in the Westwood Public Library, a community meeting room. At this meeting, we will be sharing a draft of the Climate Action Resiliency and Sustainability Plan, or CRS plan for short. There has been a team of graduate students from Tufts University that's working on a microgrid study for different regions of town for better resiliency. They are slated to present some of their findings at that meeting as well, and then just give an opportunity for the task force to weigh in and any public feedback. The goal is to have a public ready document available the week of the 11th, and I'm working with some of the board members here, as well as a few others in the task force as part of a editorial team to review the plan in the next few weeks. So it's been a great project so far, and definitely happy to get this moving, and would definitely invite the general public to attend if they're interested. You can visit this website. If you go to Westwood, look up the community and economic development planning division. We have a whole page dedicated to this. So that is an update for the Climate Action Task Force. I would like to also make an update. Regarding the MBTA Communities Law, we do have a PSA that was produced. I would just like to thank Nora and her direction with the article, and then also Amanda was able to put together a great some great visuals for this, and Westwood Media Center helped produce this. It's about 6.5 minutes, so it's it goes through the entire thing if anyone's interested in understanding what the actual MBTA Communities Law is and how it's applicable to Westwood. This really lays it out, and I would encourage anyone who is interested to visit. I can put in the chat. There's a shortened link to the website. And yeah, I would encourage folks to stay informed. Thank you.
Thank you. And I was also going to mention that video. I appreciate everybody's work on that. I think that's super helpful. My only question on that was, do we know, will Westwood Media be playing that in rotation on their cable channels as well? Is that a possibility?
Yes, so I have been working this through. So I have asked them to post it to their social media feeds, as well as the cable channel. And Jessica actually was able to mention, and I'm trying to figure out how to get access to the planning board's Facebook page so that I can share it there as well. So I'm gonna figure that out on my end and also share it there.
Fabulous. Thank you. I think the more we can do to kind of share information that helps residents understand A, the legislation, and B, what Westwood is trying to do, the more the better. So thank you to everyone involved in that. That is tremendous. All right. Did any other agency or committee reports? All right. Then the last item on our agenda is general miscellaneous updates and administrative items. I see we have upcoming planning board meetings, April 2nd, 2024 and April 24th, 2024. We also have the upcoming Finance and Warrant Commission hearing, March 26th, 2024, and the 27th if needed. And as we just discussed, we will be meeting at 6:30 on the 26th as well. Also, a reminder, annual town meeting is coming up on May 6th, 2024. Were there any other miscellaneous updates or administrative items that we needed to talk about this evening?
Should just remind people that late April meeting is on Wednesday because of Election Day, not on a Tuesday. The 24th, was that?
Yes, thank you.
Correct.
Thank you. That is a good reminder, just for everybody's planning purposes. Any other general updates or anything else we need to discuss? I'm seeing a lot of heads shaking. Then at this time, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Kate, right on top of that.
Yeah, it's her favorite motion.
She always has a big smile on her face at this point.
Hey, we moved along quite quickly this
Yeah,
year.
you
Quickly and
run a great
effectively.
meeting, Madam Chair. You run a great meeting.
Thank you very much. Well, I appreciate everybody's time and it was a good discussion this evening. So I have a motion for adjournment. I have a second for adjournment. Any further discussion on adjournment? Seeing none, I will take a roll call vote. Kate.
Aye.
Chris.
Aye.
Phil.
Aye.
Josh.
Aye.
I vote aye as well. Thank you all. Great work tonight, and everybody enjoy the rest of your week. Yes.
See you in a couple
Take care,
weeks.
all.
Thanks.
See everyone at the
everybody.
library. All right. Good night.
Good night.